There is a type of conversation that happens without sound, while someone speaks in front of you while the meeting progresses. While the world follows its visible course, a second dialogue is taking place. It's not distraction. It's not inattention. It's a parallel layer of processing that never stops, never announces itself, never asks permission to exist. If any part of this feels familiar to you, you're not alone. And if you ever feel like sharing your experience, the comments are open. The silent conversation that happens while everyone thinks you're just listening. You are in the room. You are present. Your body responds at the right moments. Your eyes follow whoever is speaking. You nod when expected. But there is an inner voice translating everything in real time, comparing, analyzing, reformulating each sentence that comes in as if it needed approval before being accepted as truth. Nobody realizes that you are conducting two simultaneous processes, the external one, where you participate, and the internal one, where you actually decide what it means. It's not cynicism, it's not distrust, it's just the way the mind protects its autonomy while pretending to agree with the collective flow of the conversation. Sometimes this internal conversation lasts longer than the real one. You answer mentally before the person finishes the question. You already know what you're going to say, but you're waiting for the right timing to speak. And while that's happening, your voice keeps testing versions, adjusting tones, anticipating reactions that may never happen. It's an invisible habit, a constant rehearsal that no one watches, a dialogue that will never be heard, but that shapes every word you finally choose to let out. And when the conversation ends, you keep reviewing, analyzing, wondering if you said enough or if you said too much. The habit of rehearsing perfect responses for situations that may never happen. You create entire scenarios in your head, conversations that don't yet exist but already have a script, tone, dramatic pauses. You rehearse what you would say if someone confronted you, if they asked you that question, if the opportunity finally arose to clarify something that no one asked for clarification on. The mind constructs imaginary dialogues with cinematic precision. You choose each word as if you were writing a speech, test different approaches, measure the emotional impact of each sentence. And the person on the other side of this fictional conversation always reacts exactly as you need them to: surprise, regret, sudden understanding. But the real moment never arrives. Or when it does, as rehearsed, the perfect words evaporate, the timing crumbles, and you're left there improvising something that doesn't have even half the strength of what you silently prepared for days, weeks, months. Still, you keep rehearsing, because rehearsal isn't about the conversation, it's about control. It's about feeling prepared for a world that never warns you when it's going to test you. And even knowing that life rarely follows the script, the mind insists on writing each scene as if this time, finally, everything will go according to plan. The mind that replays past dialogues, trying to find the exact moment where everything changed. You come back to that conversation, that silence, that second where something shifted and you didn't notice it at the time. The mind replays the scene like someone watching a movie, pausing frame by frame, searching for the exact frame where the change occurred. It's not regret, not entirely. It's emotional archaeology. You reconstruct every sentence spoken, every tone of voice, every pause that lasted a second longer than it should have. You try to identify if you were the one who said something wrong, or if the other person let slip a truth disguised as a joke. Memory becomes elastic. You add details that perhaps weren't there. You reinterpret gestures in light of what came after. And the more you review, the more versions of that moment exist in your head until you no longer know which one was real and which one you constructed trying to understand what went wrong. But the search continues because somewhere in that conversation there's an answer, a breaking point, a moment where you could have said something different, reacted differently, changed the course of what came after. And even knowing that, replaying the past in your head changes nothing. The mind insists on searching as if finding the exact moment could somehow explain everything. The urge to always imagine oneself one step ahead. Even when the body is still, you are here, but you are already there, seated, but mentally 3 steps ahead. The body occupies the present, but the mind has already mapped out what comes next, what could go wrong, what needs to be anticipated before it becomes real. It's not anxiety, not exactly. It's silent planning, an invisible game of chess where you play alone against future versions of situations that don't even exist yet. You anticipate reactions, prepare exits, build plans B, and see for conversations that may never happen the way you imagined. While the world around you flows at its natural pace, you've already calculated 5 possible outcomes. You already know what you would say if someone asked you that. You've thought about how you would react if that happened. You've already mapped out alternative routes in case the main path closes. It's exhausting, but also comforting, as if anticipating could protect you from the unexpected. The problem is that life rarely gives warning before changing direction. And while you're busy predicting every possible scenario, what actually happens is usually something you never even considered. But that doesn't matter. The mind keeps playing, anticipating, always moving 1 step ahead because stopping the calculation seems riskier than continuing. The constant internal comparison between who you are now and who you think you should be. There's a version of you that lives only in your head, clearer, more decisive, closer to what you imagine the ideal way of existing would be. And every day, without realizing it, you measure the distance between who you are and who you think you should have become. It's not about success or failure. It's about small, everyday betrayals. The ideal version would have responded more firmly, would have refused that, would have accepted this, would not have hesitated. And you're left there comparing your real choices with the choices the imaginary version would have made, as if there were an invisible standard you're constantly failing to reach. Sometimes the comparison is gentle, other times it's brutal. You look at your actions and think, this isn't me, or worse, this isn't who I wanted to be. And the distance between the 2 versions seems insurmountable, as if you were always a few steps behind yourself. But this ideal version is also a prison, because it never makes mistakes, never doubts, never yields. It exists in a vacuum where there is no weariness, fear, or contradiction. And the more you try to reach it, the more you realize you are chasing something that was never real, just a projection of what you think it should be, built from pieces of what never was. The habit of turning small decisions into long, invisible internal debates. A simple choice expands what should take seconds turns into minutes, then hours of silent processing. Not because the decision is important, but because the mind treats each choice as if it carried a greater symbolic weight than it actually does. You weigh arguments, consider implications, project consequences that will probably never come to pass. Your mind creates an internal court where each option is judged by criteria that no one else is using. And while the world goes on, you remain trapped in this loop of analysis, testing scenarios, revisiting possibilities, searching for the perfect answer to a question that was never as complex as you've made it. Sometimes you know the answer from the start, but something prevents you from simply choosing, as if deciding quickly were irresponsible, as if hesitation were proof of care. So you keep debating, adding more variables, more layers, more doubts, not because you need to, but because stopping questioning seems riskier than continuing to think. And when you finally decide, there's a weariness that no one sees, an invisible exhaustion from having transformed something small into something monumental. The decision is made, life goes on, but you're left with the feeling of having spent too much energy on a battle that only existed inside your head until the next choice, and the cycle begins again, creating alternate versions of oneself that only exist in one's head. You are not just one. You are many possibilities coexisting in silence. The mind creates parallel versions of who you could be if you had made different choices, if you had followed other paths, if you had said yes when you said no, or no when you said yes. These alternate versions have complete imaginary lives, different careers, different relationships, routines that never happened but that you mentally visit as if peeking through windows of realities you didn't choose. And sometimes these versions seem more interesting, braver, more aligned with who you think you should have become. It's not exactly regret, it's existential curiosity. A mental game where you experience identities you'll never live, but continue to nurture as if they were real. And in moments of doubt, you find yourself comparing your life to these fictional lives, wondering if you chose correctly, if it wouldn't have been better to be that other person who only exists in your imagination. But these versions never carry the weight of real consequences. They never confront the costs of the choices you romanticize. They exist in a perfect limbo where everything worked out because you controlled the narrative from beginning to end. And as long as you keep them alive in your head, they become impossible, standard shadows of what never was, but which you insist on using as a measure of what is. The recurring thought that something important is being forgotten, even without knowing what it is. There's a persistent feeling, a nameless restlessness, as if you've left something behind, something you should remember, but that slipped into an inaccessible part of your memory. It's not about commitments, it's not about tasks, it's something deeper, more undefined. You mentally review. You go through the last few days, the last conversations, the last thoughts you had before falling asleep. You search for the emptiness, the space where there should be something, but there's only this uncomfortable feeling of incompleteness. And the more you search, the more certain you become there's something important that you're not managing to reach. Sometimes it's an idea that passed by too quickly. Other times it's a promise you made to yourself that vanished before becoming action. Or perhaps it's just the accumulated weight of small, abandoned intentions, forming a fog of undone things that the mind registers as invisible pending tasks. But the thought doesn't resolve itself, it returns. In moments of silence, in pauses between one activity and another, there's always this feeling that something is missing, and you live with it, carrying this phantom forgetfulness like a mental note you can never fully read. Until, suddenly, at some random moment, it comes back or not, and the doubt remains. The silent need to justify choices to an audience that isn't present. You explain to no one. In a low voice inside your head, you construct arguments, defend decisions, justify actions as if someone were there demanding explanations. But there is no one, just you and an imaginary audience judging your every move. This invisible audience changes shape. Sometimes it's specific people. Other times it's a diffuse mass of expectations you've absorbed throughout your life and transformed into internal judges. You anticipate the criticisms they might make, prepare responses to accusations that were never verbalized, defend your innocence in processes that only exist in your mind. No matter how small the choice, there's always this urgency to prove it makes sense, that you were right, that you weren't impulsive, selfish, or cowardly, as if every decision needs external approval before it can be validated internally, and you spend energy rehearsing these defense speeches for conversations that will probably never happen. The strangest thing is that, even when you know no one is paying attention, the need remains. Because the audience isn't real, it's a reflection of what you think others think. And as long as that phantom audience exists in your head, you'll keep justifying yourself, explaining yourself, defending yourself against accusations that no one else made but yourself. The moment when the mind continues working even after the day is over, the body stops, the lights go out, the world around falls silent. But the mind doesn't receive the signal that the workday is over. It continues processing, reviewing, organizing everything that happened as if there were still something to resolve before rest arrives. You lie down, but your thoughts don't lie down with you. They circulate. They return to conversations of the day, to decisions you made, to things you said or didn't say. The mind retraces paths, reevaluates choices, prepares for tomorrow while you try to convince it that now is the time to stop. But it doesn't obey. It keeps running like a machine that has forgotten how to turn off. It's not insomnia, it's continuity. As if there's always one more layer to process, one more detail to adjust, one more worry to catalogue before allowing emptiness, and you remain there, trapped between the body's exhaustion and the mind's vigilance, waiting for it to finally accept that there's nothing more to do now. Sometimes it stops, not because you asked it to, but simply because it's tired of running on its own. And when inner silence finally arrives, you don't even notice anymore because you fell asleep mid-thought, letting your mind work until the end, even without an audience, even without urgency, simply because that's what it is italwea, and it always will. These habits have no official name. They don't appear in manuals. They are neither diagnosed nor treated. They are simply how the human mind operates when no one is watching, processing, comparing, rehearsing, revising, anticipating, always working behind the scenes of consciousness. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a pathology. It's not a flaw. It's just how you navigate an internal world that's just as complex as the external one. And if you recognized any of these patterns in yourself, know that you're not alone in this silent theater that happens inside everyone's head. The difference between those who talk about it and those who don't isn't the presence of these behaviors. It's simply the willingness to admit that they exist. And perhaps by naming what has always been there, you'll realize that carrying these internal processes doesn't make you strange, it makes you human. If this video resonated with you, consider subscribing. There's so much more to these silent behaviors that are rarely spoken aloud. And sometimes just knowing that others also experience this makes the burden feel a little lighter.